Hi, welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. Today, we get more involved into the Vietnam War. We start sending hundreds of thousands of troops over there, and tens of thousands begin being killed. Learning targets for today: identify factors that caused Johnson to increase the American troop strength. We'll assess the nature of the war in Vietnam and the effect of the low morale on American troops and on the home front. So in 1965, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, Johnson starts Operation Rolling Thunder, which is the sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam. And the aim is to pressure North Vietnam to stop supplying the Viet Cong in the South. And we drop more bombs on North Vietnam than in all of Europe by the Allies combined in World War II. And that is quite a lot of bombs on quite a little country. We commit more troops. By the end of 1965, we end up with over 180,000. And these advisors that were there, that Kennedy put there, are now turning into soldiers, and they're led by General William Westmoreland, Times Man of the Year during this time, and he is the driving force, the general, the mastermind behind this Vietnam War. He and Defense Secretary Robert McNamara felt the U.S. needed to fight more in order to win the war and to fight with more troops and with more supplies. And so William Westmoreland will continue to request troops and supplies, and he'll continue to get them from President Johnson. New weapons that are being used in the Vietnam War, including in Operation Rolling Thunder, are Agent Orange, which is an herbicide used to kill plant life. And it is sprayed from these planes over the jungles of Vietnam to kill the plant life, so it's easier to find Vietnamese or Viet Cong hiding places. Unfortunately, they really didn't test it, and it causes cancer and birth defects to those who come into contact with it. Both Vietnamese soldiers, Vietnamese civilians, and U.S. soldiers. 12 million gallons are sprayed over Vietnam and kills and does devastation to the ecosystem there. Also, napalm is a jellied gasoline that is flammable, and it's difficult to extinguish. And so a bomb is dropped and it explodes and it sprays napalm everywhere. It clings to your clothes and your skin. It causes your skin to kind of melt off because it's almost impossible to extinguish. And so it's a very, very nasty weapon that was introduced during Vietnam War. Ho's military doctrine. He is the type of person, he uses a very Asian style of fighting, which is never fight on your opponent's terms, always fight on yours. He compares the NVA troops to a tiger, and the Viet Cong to a tiger, and the U.S. troops are an elephant. And the tiger just kind of darts around and cannot stay in one place, or else the elephant will crush it. And so keep moving around the elephant, and occasionally strike the elephant. And if you strike it enough, the elephant will eventually bleed to death. So this is exactly what happens. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese avoid fighting in large battles and large skirmishes with the United States. Because of our increased firepower, our superior firepower, we would destroy them. And so they're not stupid. They're not going to get into a fight with us like that. They're going to kind of dart around and hit us and then retreat and hit and run guerrilla warfare tactics in order to win this war. The American mission at this point is to win the hearts and minds of South Vietnamese citizens. We want them to want us there. Our sustained bombing campaign does disrupt North Vietnamese industry, and it does slow the supply movement to the Viet Cong in the South. But the communists do not give up, so the Americans keep sending more troops and more supplies, and the death count continues to escalate. By 1968, over 30,000 troops have been killed in just 3 years. And unfortunately, in South Vietnam, the government we are supporting is corrupt, and it does not even enjoy support out of the large cities. So the U.S. is only really welcome in large cities, but in the villages outside of those large cities, the U.S. troops are not wanted there. They are looked down upon. They are looked at as a nuisance. They don't want them there. They don't have the hearts and minds of South Vietnamese citizens. And that is what Robert McNamara said. He coined that phrase, hearts and minds of the South Vietnamese citizens. So war difficulties, over 58,000 Americans are eventually killed. We spend billions and billions of dollars, $729 billion if adjusted for inflation. The U.S. has trouble telling the Viet Cong from civilians because they all wear the same clothes. And the Viet Cong, they change into kind of black pajamas in the nighttime. So the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, like I said before, avoid engaging U.S. troops, and they attack in small groups and then disappear. And they usually do it at night. They set explosives near American encampments, and they set booby traps to cripple these American troops. And yet the Americans still fight on. They fight for different reasons. Some are there if they volunteered to prevent the spread of communism. Some fight for humanitarian reasons, helping South Vietnamese villagers get a better life. And some fight because they feel honored to represent their country in the military. 10,000 women serve in Vietnam, most as nurses, but they too had to fight close to the lines and look at death and go through emotional experiences every day. And so morale starts to wear down. Now that we have a draft in the United States, and we'll focus on the United States next time, these draftees are forced into fighting and are being killed for a country that resents them for being there. South Vietnam doesn't want us there. The majority of South Vietnam does not want the U.S. in their country. The average age of a soldier in Vietnam was 22 years old, and over 10,000 of the 58,000 that were killed in action are less than 20 years old. It's just a waste of a life, unfortunately. Back home, there is low morale because Americans are really starting to wonder, is preserving the government in South Vietnam vital to American interests? And they're losing brothers, husbands, sons, and people really start to protest. This war also puts a huge dent in LBJ's Great Society domestic programs because it creates inflation in the economy, and we'll have high inflation in the early 70s, and it forces Johnson to raise taxes and cut back on the Great Society to pay for the war. And so an anti-war movement emerges and becomes quite the majority. Most Americans expect a quick victory in Vietnam, and when it does not come, we start to become frustrated. So Congress and America are split into two sections over the war in 1967. Doves, think of a dove as a symbol of peace. They break with Johnson's war policy, and they're the ones who questions the war's morals and strategies. And hawks, think of a hawk as like a bird of war or a bird of prey, believes in Johnson's war policy and says that the containment of communism is vital to American interests. And so that is where we're going to stop for the day. Section 3 will focus more on the war at home, and I hope to see you then. Fill out your learning targets, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.